Gunther Fellinger-Jahn, an Austrian economist and NATO advocate, has made waves with his recent statements, claiming that the European Union and the United States should recognize the Biafran Republic. This bold assertion follows the long-running Biafran separatist cause, which dates back to the Nigerian civil war of the late 1960s. Fellinger-Jahn's calls for the recognition of Biafra have stirred significant attention and controversy both within Nigeria and internationally. He argues that the Western world owes the Biafran people an apology and support for their independence, as the region's grievances were largely ignored after the war, which ended in 1970. His comments have found a receptive audience among those who believe that the southeastern part of Nigeria, predominantly Igbo, has faced decades of marginalization. Now, let's take a moment to dive into what all this really means. The Biafran cause has never truly gone away. Though the Nigerian government decisively defeated the secession attempt during the Civil War, the issues that led to it, discrimination, political exclusion, and economic neglect, still resonate with many in the region. This is not just a historical issue, but one that continues to play out in Nigerian politics today. Nnamdi Kanu, leader of the Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB, has become the face of modern-day Biafran secessionism. His calls for independence have garnered both passionate support and fierce opposition. His detention by the Nigerian government has sparked protests and renewed debates about the political future of the Southeast. Fellinger-Jahn's statements support Kanu's call for Biafra's independence, but this support is not without controversy. His remarks urging the international community to recognize Biafra as a new nation carry significant diplomatic weight, even though they are not backed by official EU or NATO policy. NATO's involvement in global geopolitics makes Fellinger-Jahn's position noteworthy, but it's important to remember that NATO, as an institution, has not issued any formal statement endorsing Biafra's separation from Nigeria. Fellinger-Jahn's statements appear to be his own personal stance, not a reflection of official NATO or EU policy. This brings us to the next point. Why does this matter to you, the everyday viewer, or anyone following this story? First, it speaks to the ongoing tension between local autonomy and national unity. Many of us can relate to the idea of wanting a voice in the decisions that impact our communities. For people in the southeast of Nigeria, the historical and present-day sense of injustice makes the call for an independent Biafra seem like a righteous cause. They argue that the Nigerian state has failed them for decades, and now some of them believe that they should be free to chart their own course. But at the same time, when we look at the larger picture, we realize how delicate the issue is. If Biafra were to be recognized, it would set a precedent that could embolden other regions of the world with similar independence movements. It could open the floodgates for territorial disputes and self-determination claims that would be difficult to resolve peacefully. This is why the international community, including the United States, the European Union, and the United Nations, must tread carefully when it comes to recognizing breakaway states. They have to balance respecting people's right to self-determination with the broader need for stability and peace in a region. The situation is further complicated by the reactions from the Nigerian government. They have long considered the idea of secession as a threat to the integrity of the state. When Fellinger-Jahn and others from the international community make calls for Biafran independence, it's not just a diplomatic issue. It becomes a national security issue for the Nigerian government. In their view, allowing one part of the country to break away could inspire others to do the same, leading to fragmentation and instability across the nation. It could also set a dangerous precedent for other African countries, many of which are already dealing with secessionist movements and regional conflicts. Fellinger-Jahn's message calls attention to the significant history of Biafra and the Igbo people's experiences during the Civil War. But we can't forget that the call for Biafran independence is not universally supported, even among Nigerians in the Southeast. Many believe that the issues can be addressed within the framework of a united Nigeria. They argue that rather than splitting the country, the government should engage in reforms, including political restructuring, to ensure equitable treatment for all regions. The fear is that secession could lead to unnecessary violence and economic hardship,
something Nigerians have already experienced in the aftermath of the Civil War. Let's take a moment to break it down.
Because this whole debate boils down to several big questions. Is it realistic for Biafra to be recognized as an independent state? If the region were to separate, what would happen to the millions of Nigerians living there? Would they be better off, or would they find themselves in the midst of a chaotic transition period? These are the hard questions that need to be asked. It's easy to say, let's just break away and form a new country. But it's another thing to manage the logistics of such a move. Who would lead Biafra? What would the economy look like? What about the military? Would Biafran independence mean violence or peaceful negotiation? Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Biafra should be independent? Or do you think it's better for the Southeast to stay in Nigeria and fight for political and economic reforms?
I know this is a sensitive topic, but it's important that we have this conversation. We need to hear from all sides to understand the full scope of what's at stake here. I also want to mention that while this talk about Biafra might sound far off, it's not just a theoretical issue. It's happening right now, with groups like IPOB continuing to agitate for independence and more international figures weighing in. So, as this story continues to develop, I'll keep bringing you the latest updates, and we'll see how this story unfolds in the coming weeks. Now, we've been talking about the potential implications of Biafra's recognition as an independent state, but we can't ignore the possible outcomes of these discussions if things start to escalate. Remember, we're talking about a region that has historically been at odds with the central government, and while the support for independence is strong in some quarters, there are plenty of people who believe the path forward lies not in separation, but in reform and peaceful coexistence. One of the key things to note here is the role of international support and how it could impact the situation. Felingerian has called for global recognition, which, if it ever gained traction, could significantly shift the political and diplomatic landscape. But here's where it gets tricky. For the EU and the US to officially recognize Biafra, it would mean taking a stand against the Nigerian government. That's not a small thing. It's easy to forget how much international diplomacy revolves around maintaining strong relationships with powerful countries.
Especially one like Nigeria, which is the most populous nation in Africa and plays a crucial role in regional stability. Recognition of Biafra would also be an economic issue. Nigeria's economy is a key player in Africa, and any shift in its structure could have ripple effects across the continent. Investors, for example, would have a lot to consider. Would Biafra be able to maintain the resources it needs to thrive, or would it face economic struggles due to border challenges, loss of oil reserves, or international isolation? Countries that are watching this situation closely, particularly in Africa, might see the outcome of this debate as a barometer for other regional disputes on the continent. What happens to Biafra could potentially set a precedent for other movements across the world. Places like Catalonia, Scotland,
or even regions in the Middle East. Another thing to consider is the human aspect. While political leaders debate the future of a region, it's the people who live in those regions who are impacted the most. The southeastern part of Nigeria, the area that would make up Biafra, is home to millions of people. Many of them feel that their voices are ignored by the central government. But many also live peacefully within the Nigerian framework, contributing to the national economy, and would not want to risk their livelihoods in an uncertain secession. As a country, Nigeria already faces numerous internal challenges. For example, Boko Haram insurgency, economic instability, and rising tensions between different ethnic and religious groups. Adding secessionist movements into the mix could stretch the government's resources even further. It's crucial to think about the stability of the region as a whole when discussing these independence movements. Nigeria, in its current state, is fragile, and carving it into smaller pieces could potentially lead to more conflict, not less. That's why discussions around Biafra aren't just about the wishes of a few. They affect the future of an entire population. Peaceful resolution, dialogue, and inclusive governance are all key to ensuring that everyone's voices are heard, not just those calling for independence. The world, especially Africa, is watching to see how Nigeria handles this issue. And Nigeria's response could set the tone for how such movements are handled across the globe. I know this issue is complex, and it brings up strong emotions for many people. What's clear, however, is that the international community, alongside Nigeria, has to consider what will lead to long-term peace and stability. Sometimes the loudest voices get attention, but the most sustainable solutions are the ones that work in the long run. Before we wrap up, I want to remind you to like this video if you enjoyed this breakdown. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on this and other breaking news. It's so important that we have conversations like this one, and I want to make sure you're getting the best, most accurate information as it unfolds. Tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.